This is the future of warfare. A bombing run over North Korea, done virtually with 3D glasses and an electronic glove. Today, it's a practice run. But in a few years' time, with a wave of a hand, American commanders could control an entire battlefield. That's the ambition.
It is within our capability today to see a battlefield that is perhaps 200 or 300 miles on a side, and to see everything that goes on in that battlefield, and to know what is happening there. If you see a battlefield that way and an enemy doesn't, you have dominant battlefield awareness and you win. It is the essence of the revolution in military affairs, and I don't think anybody other than our Western democracies will be able to do that in the rest of our lifetime.
With this scientific advantage, Americans believe they can win any war, anywhere in the world.
Knock, knock. Coming at you.
It's called full spectrum dominance.
Sir, I have SyncPack on the line with a conference call.
I'll take it in here.
Yes, sir.
Admiral Griffith, SyncPack link is now available.
Computer open link.
The future as seen by the Pentagon's Advanced Research Projects Agency. It spends billions of dollars every year turning cutting-edge science into defense systems.
Have we determined the size of the insurgent force holding the consulate?
30 to 40. That's based on humans from an
Global Positioning System satellites map the battle zone with pinpoint accuracy.
Where the hostages are in the compound.
We'll be getting full spectrum surveillance. We'll have that analysis.
Computers integrate real-time data and images.
Mission rehearsals are underway.
Aye, sir. Simulated air support and helicopter operation rehearsals commenced at 1800 hours.
Everything works perfectly.
Integrating helo evac option event list into JFlex timeline. Critical path analysis executing.
Sir, we have no civilian losses in the consulate operation.
Is that confirmed?
Yes, sir.
And of course, the Americans win with few casualties.
Less than 30 minutes ago, American helicopter.
The Mojave Desert, California. Here, scientists and engineers are making full-spectrum dominance a reality at Edwards Air Force Base, America's high-security test flight center.
Ryan Test, this is Ryan 3. How do you copy?
Yes, the copy of 5-5, sir.
Ryan Ground, gate is open. Personnel are clear. Wing walkers left, right in place. We're ready to go.
Takeoff executed.
Power coming up.
Command is accepted. Brakes released. Power up.
Looking good. We are airborne. Flight number 1.
This is Global Hawk, and it's revolutionary. A pilotless battlefield spy plane. It can fly up to 14,000 miles to anywhere on Earth. There it can circle for 24 hours, sending back real-time panoramic images of the battlefield. These can be seen at the same time by commanders on the ground and generals in the Pentagon. America's strategists believe this will revolutionize warfare.
When you start to have that kind of capability, you start to bring a lot of knowledge to war fighting, and when you can do that, you can fight wars in radically different ways.
If you were a country considering pursuing interests inimical to the United States, how would you reflect upon Global Hawk?
I would think that maybe I should start to undertake different kinds of warfare, that perhaps the day of tank battles or the day of ship battles, airplane battles are nearing an end, that the time has come when I can no longer win in a situation where I'm faced with this kind of technology. It's not just Global Hawk, it's also Dark Star, a similar capability that is very difficult to see.
Dark Star, America's ultimate secret agent. Unlike Global Hawk, it's invisible to radar. It can fly secretly over enemy territory and send back target imagery so detailed you can see if your enemy is wearing his hat. These unmanned spy planes use a lot of technologies already in service on other aircraft, so hundreds can be built at low cost once in production. But today, Global Hawk and Dark Star are eating up hundreds of millions of pounds in development costs, which probably no other nation than America can afford.
All right.
These new scientific developments are largely classified, off limits to the American public, still used to seeing the military perform in more familiar roles.
On behalf of Major General George Harmeyer, the commander of the United States Army Armor Center in Fort Knox, the home of modern warfare, welcome to the modern combined arms battlefield and the 1998 Fort Knox Combined Arms Live Fire Exercise.
Ladies and gentlemen, just 6 short months ago, I was platoon leader, patrolling the Korean DMZ and enforcing international peace across the dense terrain of the Korean border. Today, I'm assisting my commander in coordinating the efforts of 8 major weapon systems and a high-intensity demonstration of combined arms warfare.
The weapons and troops with which the Allies defeated the Iraqis during Operation Desert Storm. At Washington's Institute of Defense Analysis, they view the campaign as a giant laboratory. It's been minutely dissected and analyzed. They've made a detailed digital reconstruction of one of the battles. The results are revealing. American technical superiority was overwhelming. Their tank crews had global positioning system receivers, so they knew where they were in the desert. The Iraqis did not. Only the Americans had uranium-tipped armor-piercing shells and infrared thermal sights. But there was something more. Many of the Iraqi tanks were out of action before the battle began.
The Iraqi forces were a little skittish in that they had just been through 100 days of bombing, and quite often what happened, they noticed a tank on the right, the tank on the left burst into flames, and soon decided that being in that tank is not the healthiest place to be, and they would get out of the tank and into the little personnel bunkers that they dug adjacent to the tanks.
Many Iraqi crews took the tanks' batteries into the bunkers. Without power, their tanks couldn't start, their guns couldn't fire. It was no contest. To American defense scientists, this holds a warning. They know they must maintain their technological advantage to avoid the risk of heavy casualties in future wars.
Had the Iraqi forces been equipped with the same sights and munitions and the same tank that we had, it probably would have been a very different story, a very different outcome.
But today, the American public have other thoughts on their mind. American spending on defense research is now as high as at any time during the Cold War. Just a few miles away from this Florida beach is Eglin Air Force Base. Here, scientists and pilots are busy developing the next generation of weapons, ones that risk few American lives and actually think for themselves.
Tracking, good laser. 3 is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Impact. Impact. Good one.
Well, we refer to this as the world's smallest cruise missile. It's 30 inches in length, has the capability of flying greater than 100 kilometers, and is equipped with a state-of-the-art laser radar seeker a multi-mode warhead that's effective against a wide variety of targets.
It's going to know what it's going after with that laser radar seeker on the front. It's going to know it's a tank. It's going to know whether maybe it's a radar vehicle van. And the difference between those two is the way you want to try and kill it.
And the people in it.
And necessarily the people in it.
How did you get involved in weapons design?
With my aerospace engineering degree, I really wanted to apply it to aerospace vehicles, and the opportunity here at the Air Force Research Lab presented itself, and I was very excited to be able to find employment here, and I've been here since 1979.
And this is perfect. This is the job that I want to do as far as physics in the Air Force goes. This is a good place to be.
So you enjoy the work?
I thoroughly enjoy the work. This is great.
The new mini cruise will revolutionize tank battles, and it's cheap, $200 for the price of a tank. Hundreds can be dropped from a single aircraft, but scientists are especially proud of its unique warhead.
What we have here is a multi-mode warhead that combines a copper liner as well as a high explosive and what we refer to as multi-point detonators. And those multi-point detonators allow this multi-mode warhead to form into one of three modes depending upon the type of target you want to defeat.
Against a soft target like a Scud missile launcher, the warhead blasts down fragments and rips it to shreds. If it senses a heavier target, like an armored personnel carrier, the warhead changes its shape into a heavy slug.
For those modes where you really want to go through a tremendous amount of armor, such as a tank, where you're penetrating through maybe 12 inches of steel, you want to form finally this explosively formed penetrator. It's essentially a jet of copper that flies down into the tank. And when you do so, you form a copper jet that essentially will penetrate, and in this case, something on the order of 10 to 12 inches of steel.
Now, how does a copper jet defeat a tank?
Because when you detonate this copper liner, it causes that liner to accelerate into the target over 6,000 feet per second, and that tremendous amount of kinetic energy is allowed to just essentially penetrate through the steel like it was butter.
And how thick is that copper disc?
The copper disc is probably something less than a quarter-inch, roughly.
And that can destroy a tank?
And that can destroy and go right through a tank and just kill the components inside of that. And if, unfortunately...
Components being the men in the tank?
Men in the tank, equipment in the tank, the motors, whatever happens to be there in the tank that this item particular penetrates through.
Does this spell the end of tanks?
You can imagine as this technology progresses, so too will technology to try to counter these type of new warheads. So is this an end? No, I don't think it's ever an end. It's kind of a tit for tat that we always go through. But as of right now, yes, those guys are sitting ducks.
At Eglund, they're also developing the new Jumbo cruise missile to be launched from the air against key targets in enemy cities hundreds of miles away.
I'm Terry Little, the program director for the Joint Air-Surface Standoff Missile, this little baby right here. It's a next-generation cruise missile for both the Air Force and the Navy. The missile flies to the target using inertial guidance updated with global positioning system. Once it gets to the target, it has an infrared seeker that senses the radiation coming from the target and then matches it to pre-stored information that's in the missile. The overall result is the missile has an accuracy of around 10 feet.
So you're saying this missile can be fired from 200 miles away and hit a target within 10 feet?
That's right.
With a 1,000-pound bomb?
With a 1,000-pound bomb, and 10 feet away from a 1,000-pound bomb is not a road that anybody wants to go down. You know, that's not a good road to be going down.
And it only costs $400,000?
$400,000 is, considering what we're getting, a bargain basement price.
How many of these are you going to make?
The plan right now is to buy about 2,400 of these.
That's a lot of missiles. The Americans fired just 288 Tomahawk cruise missiles against Iraq in Desert Storm. All were ship-launched, relatively slow, and not that accurate. The designers claim the new missiles can't miss. They're almost invisible, will know exactly where they're going, and there will be no warning.
This really changes the equation with warfare. On the enemy side, faced with this kind of threat, he's got to be able to come to grips with the fact that there's essentially no sanctuary from this missile. Essentially, the first indication that he would have that the missile was there would be the explosion.
A lot of people are going to say the Cold War is over. Who's the enemy?
We've got enemies all over. We've got lots of sort of major power threats that potentially could work against our interest. We've got emerging countries that even today we may not think of them as being a threat, that at some point may pose a threat to the United States. Countries that we don't have a sense even today that they're going to be a threat.
And this could be used against
This could be used against anything. This is not something that's dependent on some kind of a desert storm kind of a scenario. You could even use one of these against a group or a country and make your point with just one. And not too dissimilar with what we did when we used the atomic bomb against the Japanese, where we didn't have to go and destroy the country and drop a lot of bombs. In that case, there were two. They got the point, they surrendered, and that was the end of that. I envision that in a much less spectacular way, this could serve that same function. It is that much of a quantum leap forward in our capability.
If you go to war against the United States today, and it is a genuine war, you don't have a chance. This ability to do precision strikes, this ability to do dominant maneuver in a battlefield is becoming so profound that your chances are very limited.
But the next war may be so different there's no battlefield. The first strike may not be from a cruise missile, but from a computer. Computers are becoming new weapons in their own right. And today, scientists are imagining and planning for the inevitable, full-scale cyber war. John Woodward is head of information warfare at one of America's largest defense contractors. It works closely with the intelligence community.
Most of the infrastructure today and increasingly in the future depends on underlying information technology. So the power grid, telecommunications infrastructure, the transportation industry, air traffic control, they could all be damaged by information warfare. A technology that is used increasingly in terms of information warfare is commonly called hacking, trying to break into computer systems. Teenagers do this a lot. There's been a lot of news reports about that. But there would be a difference between a teenager carrying out this kind of hacking attack and a professional information warrior carrying out the attack. The hackers break into computer systems indiscriminately. A professional might choose a critical computer system that was a key node in making some particular type of operation or some function work, and would choose the key node to attack first or to disable.
If he were a determined cyber warrior, what could he do to bring a government to its knees?
If I was trying to influence a nation state to change their behavior in some way, I might be willing to shut down the telecommunications system of a city for an hour so I can reach out and I can impact the lives of the citizenry in a relatively minor way. But if I can convince them it's at my will, then I will be I may have an influencing effect on them. Now, information warfare can be, theoretically at least, quite surgical. If I'm really good, and in some case you might say if I'm really lucky, I might be able to go in and specifically target what I cut the power to. But the fear is, unless you are really good at what you're doing and have practiced it, that you might do a little bit more than you want to. So I might attack the electrical structure in a country with an intent, for example, to disable the transportation system or an airport, but have as a collateral damage taking the power out for a hospital. If you shut down power someplace and somebody's on an iron lung, you know, they're going to die. One could also imagine that if you made a big structured information warfare attack on a metropolitan area that shut down power, that impeded transportation, that shut down communications, that, quite frankly, rioting and looting would probably occur.
This could all be done covertly, without declaring war. Are there any defenses against it?
Most countries would have some level of defenses against an information warfare attack. But inherently, it's probably impossible to defend against every type of information warfare attack.
From what you've been saying, it sounds to me as if other countries are going to need people like you and your colleagues if they're going to be able to provide adequate national defense in the future.
That's fair, but you say that other countries are going to need people like us. They may have people like us already. People like us are computer scientists, radio frequency communication engineers, and there's a lot of those.
The Pandora's box of cyber war is now open. In future wars, scientists will fight scientists. Yet Americans know they still have a problem. However great their scientific advantage, inevitably US troops will get sent overseas, and that means casualties, particularly in far-off foreign cities. So they're gathering intelligence to build virtual models of the world's cities. The aim is, US troops will know them like the back of their hand before they get there.
What we are attempting to do is to give our troops and our command authorities as well the ability to visualize a situation as it's beginning to occur. We're working on Washington, D.C., right in our own backyard. Once we have mastered the things that we need to do to satisfy a variety of customers and requirements, then the next step is to essentially be able to go overseas at a moment's notice to a hot spot anywhere overseas, or for that matter within the country, to help military or law enforcement. Military tend to want not to operate in cities. They're very dangerous environments. Things happen very quickly right in front of your face, and a soldier, maybe an 18-year-old, has to make a decision as to whether or not he'll pull a trigger, perhaps in a split second. And his decision may be broadcast within minutes or hours by CNN or other news media around the world. And within 24 hours, it may affect national policy. And we've seen that happen already in places like Mogadishu, Somalia. I'm sure very well aware of the one instance in which a helicopter was downed, and that resulted in the part of the crew being dragged through the streets within hours. That was on national television and, in fact, beamed around the world.
Within days, American troops were ordered home.
Checking the play box. And
Today, the Marines are trying to avoid another Mogadishu by applying science to urban combat. In this experiment at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, they're testing the role of precision bombs, dropped virtually of course, in a Marine assault on rebel forces in a foreign city.
This really isn't an exercise, it's an experiment. And we're experimenting with the different tactics, techniques that we want to use to help us in urban combat.
What are the problems with urban combat?
One of the big problems with urban combat is just the intensity of the fire that's needed to clear buildings. We also have problems with command and control. Once you go into an area, it's very easy to lose track of where your forces are.
And what about casualties?
Oscar 3
is that a problem?
That's always a problem, and particularly when you go into an industrial type area or a very heavily populated area. There's a real problem between determining the things that you can target and what you can't target. There are civilians in this area, and we don't want to target them.
Out on the ground, the precision bombing is already getting messy. These are Marines playing the role of the rebel opposition forces. The government building where most of them were hiding has been bombed by the Americans, killing over half of them. So they're taking civilian hostages to act as human shields.
Why do you think you've been captured?
They want to keep us in this building so that the American forces don't bomb it.
So you're a hostage?
Yes, sir.
We thought that by taking some of the civilians hostage, moving them into the buildings, we'd have a better chance of staying alive a little bit longer for the rest of this battle. And that's where we're at right now.
Sounds like a messy war.
Yes, very messy, very messy.
Scott, if you will, let's bump to...
Back at the experiment headquarters, the Marine Air Force is evaluating the bombing of the opposition forces. It's all done virtually, of course.
We've taken Camp Lejeune, a base, and we've made it an urban training range for aviation. The folks can go about their business day to day on the ground, have no idea what's going on overhead, but all going on overhead is an urban fight where we're dropping bombs on their heads and shooting rockets down into the streets in support of this urban operation, okay?
Let me show you what happens when this type of structure has been hit by a Hellfire missile. We had a penetration hole that came through the roof into the building itself. You can actually see where the detonation occurred inside the room at that entry point where it traveled roughly that 8 feet. And it's the first calculation of the blast radius of what it is. And so you see the spherical area inside the house itself. Now turn it off. You can actually go inside this building. You can walk through these buildings in a virtual world, or fly through them as we call it. And now you can come in and see where it is actually cratered out. You can see why the pressure in one room is the way it is and how the bleed path starts and actually goes throughout the house.
The potential goes well beyond this exercise. Using foreign construction codes, maps, and other intelligence, scientists aim to determine the type of plane, munition, and warhead needed to destroy any building in the world.
What the Marine Corps can do is anticipate certain areas in the world where we might find ourselves employed. We can take those cities and the objective areas or certain key nodes in that city, and we can replicate them as you see here. Having done that, we can do the necessary planning with our weapons and weapons employment to make ourselves more effective and efficient once we actually get there and conduct operations. Having done it before, virtually, when it comes to doing it for real, be a piece of cake.
Night falls. Despite the precision bombing, the Marines will have to attack to clear the city.
Beach assault. I expect them to try helo assaults and LZs. And that's why we got the squad back here to cover this.
Do you think your forces have a chance?
I think we have a chance. We always have a chance, sure.
The remaining opposition forces move into position and wait for the Marine assault.
What do you think of this exercise?
I think it needs to be done because it's basically the war of the future. No, that's what's upcoming because of the past events, the past battles that we've had, are mostly urban environments.
Are you expecting to win this engagement?
Oh, hell yeah, by far.
Why do you think you win?
We did this last time. Last time they put us out in the woods because we were winning too much. So they had to get rid of us. The Marines always got to win.
The Marines arrived and the fighting began. We crossed the lines to join the Marines and find out how they were doing.
Machine gun first!
Fill up on water and then get back outside.
How long ago did you arrive here?
About 40 minutes ago, sir.
Were there op forces in here?
Yes, sir, there were. Approximately 3 op forces were inside the building when we arrived here, sir.
And what'd you do?
When we arrived, we took a small shot on the front hatch and then moved inside the building and cleared from the first deck up, sir.
So the building is now in the hands of the Marines?
Yes, it is, sir.
And what's going on outside?
Right now, we're holding position until we get our other forces come in for our plan of attack, and then after that, we're going to move out to another position.
Go, move. Hey, who's got the assault? Are the assaults with you?
No, they're not. I only got machine guns right now.
Hey, assaults! Assault!
As the Marines left, we went upstairs, where we found the captain of the opposition forces, very much alive.
Captain, what are you doing here?
We doing here?
Yeah.
They didn't come through this room, by the way. Here, this is your weapon safe. Where's the phones at?
Right there, sir. Over there. So you're still alive?
Oh, yeah. They didn't come through here.
And your troops are still alive?
Well, the troops that I have here are still alive, yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Lucky, but they weren't through. That's just it. They weren't through.
So, like any good guerrilla commander, he called in artillery strikes on the Marine armored vehicles just outside.
Assess an appropriate number of casualties inside, such as your hatches open, and you'd be getting bomblets, a few bomblets probably flying in.
As the Marines count casualties, the experiment's coordinators take stock.
There's probably about a squad of the bad guys left. The only real weapons they have to fight back with at this time are their artillery.
What about the captain in charge of the opposition forces?
He's still alive.
Are you surprised?
Not necessarily surprised. That's a large area, a lot of buildings, a lot of rooms. It's going to be difficult to clear.
It's an uncomfortable truth. There's no substitute for good soldiering. For some time yet, it seems urban warfare is likely to pose problems that science alone cannot solve. Here in the New Mexico desert, the role of science in warfare is more assured. Among the sagebrush and behind wire fences, weapons scientists are busy keeping America's nuclear stockpile in perfect working order. The United States has signed treaties saying it won't make any new explosive packages at the core of nuclear weapons. But at the Sandia National Laboratory, they're free to modify and upgrade the other 6,000-odd parts in each warhead and bomb. It's part of the Stockpile Stewardship Program, with a budget of more than $4 billion a year.
There isn't any weapon in the stockpile that doesn't have something that's in the process of being changed. A manual, a part, a piece, or that isn't on the schedule to have something changed. One group of people would believe that this is a violation of the intent of the Test Ban Treaty. Frankly, the intent of the Test Ban Treaty was to stop qualitative improvements in nuclear explosives.
So at Sandia today, they're tailoring nuclear weapons for new roles. Already, the B-61 bomb, which used to explode on impact, has been modified to penetrate underground bunkers. The scientists insist that this is allowed.
Under no circumstances do we or do the official policies of the government recognize that in the current status, that our ability to modify the weapons to increase their reliability, their safety, their use control or security, to allow its adaptation to be modern and to fit the needs of the military. None of these things are either prohibited or even assumed to be prohibited in the sense of the policies of the United States.
The stockpile program is important in another way, too.
Unfortunately, people age, they get older, and eventually they leave. And so we have to replace old people with new people. As it turns out, the stewardship program becomes an indispensable element of attracting some subset of the best and brightest minds.
Sandia attracts young scientists by giving them the chance to work with new technologies, like micro-machines, complex silicon components built on the scale of a dust mite.
I think that the first challenge that we face in being a nuclear weapons laboratory is how do you create a burning desire on the part of brilliant young scientists in the country to come to Sandia and to work on weapons. And we feel that these technologies like micromachining are not only really relevant technically for nuclear weapons, but they also create a sense of excitement about getting people to come to Sandia and work on the weapons.
How do you feel about working on nuclear weapons?
It hasn't really bothered me at all. It's an area that's interesting. I guess one view is that the U.S. Has always viewed this as kind of just a, how do I want to say, kind of in a benign position, just a preventative position to have nuclear weapons. And they've never used it offensively, and so I do not see a problem.
I think this is leading edge technology that's going to be around for decades. And for nuclear weapons, I think the role that we play here is vital, and I'm glad to be part of it.
In order to arm the weapon, you'd need to pop up a mirror that would complete a optical fire chain. It works very similar to the traditional macro component, only it's microscopic in dimensions.
What you can see here, if you look at them, it's kind of hard to see, are one of these locking type mechanisms. It also contains some of these pop-up mirrors which redirect an optical signal. Some of the individual pieces that move on here are on the order of, say, the same as the diameter of a human hair.
All of which means more space in the warheads for new devices to tailor more precisely what the weapons will do. But will the new components work when the bombs explode? That's what nuclear testing was for. Today, the tests have been replaced in part by this machine, which costs over $5 billion.
This is the Z accelerator. It's an electrical generating device that produces more electrical power in one place than anywhere on the surface of the Earth. The way it works is that we store energy we get from the Albuquerque electric power grid in a set of capacitors over a period of 2 minutes. When we release that energy, it comes out in the time scale of 1 microsecond, and the power is amplified by a factor of 100 million. Then on this side, where we have water as an insulator, we compress that pulse another factor of 10 to the point that we have an electrical source of energy that exceeds 50 trillion watts of electrical power, and it occurs over a time scale of 100 billionths of a second. Now, if you could picture all of the electrical power in the world on the surface of the Earth being used at any time in all of the factories, every electric motor, all of the automobiles, all of the airplanes, you would find that we have significantly more electrical power for the brief instant of time in this machine than everything else put together. That power occurs in the space of only 1 millimeter and a time scale of 100 billionths of a second.
Now that underground tests are banned, Sandia needs the Z machine to replicate what happens when nuclear weapons explode.
In underground testing, what happens when a nuclear weapon device goes off is that an immense temperature is generated, a temperature of many millions of degrees. What we're trying to do with the X-ray source in the Z accelerator and with other capabilities across the U.S. is to mimic the effects of a nuclear explosion to get the physics of what happens right.
So today at Sandia, scientists are working on nuclear weapons, just as they were during the Cold War.
When I came to Sandia, I was asked a very simple question. That question was, did I have a fundamental objection to working on nuclear weapons? I thought about the question, and I answered no. I believed that it was important to have nuclear weapons to ensure world peace. Not everybody believes that. But this is a question that I learned to ask routinely of people coming in the door, and that's everyone hired in the Pulse Power Sciences Center, whether they have a fundamental objection to working on nuclear weapons. If they had an objection, then Sandia would not be the place to work. They're not hired.
But how will the modernized weapons be used? Sandia scientists are thinking about that too, imagining new roles for their bombs on the battlefield.
The nuclear weapon itself is an amazingly powerful system for instance, destroying a pass and keeping the movement of material or troops between two countries from occurring. As I said, you can take out a chemical or biological facility. You could, in fact, terminate a major war at the battlefield by having a couple of weapons that break up large concentrations of manpower, in fact, give time and ability of forces to regroup from a defensive position. So we have to get out of the mode that occupied our mind for 50 years, which is exchanges against principal cities across the world, and imagine that as we move away from that time, there may be a role for nuclear weapons in a much more limited sense, and we should be prepared as a world to recognize that that may occur, and we as a lab have to be prepared not to advertise it as a great idea, but to have the technologies available should they be needed.
Across the desert, close to the Sandia lab, another revolution is in progress. America's $7 billion program to build an airborne laser that can shoot down medium-range missiles from a 747 jumbo jet at a distance of up to 300 miles.
Today, more than 30 nations possess theater ballistic missiles. At least a dozen nations are known to have nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons. And the threat is growing every day. The solution? The airborne laser. ABL uses a multi-megawatt chemical oxygen iodine laser, or COIL, to destroy missiles in their boost phase. The resulting debris and the missile's deadly cargo falls back on the aggressor's own territory. This speed-of-light weapon will dramatically change the way in which future conflicts are fought.
At the heart of this massive research program have been father and son, Don and Steve Lamberson.
The fascination of airborne lasers is the ability to kill a target from some distance from the airplane, to do that at the speed of light. And we think that that's an important thing to do, and it will happen.
That's right. We're going to be doing the demonstration to prove that the entire system works, and then we plan to field the system 4 or 5 years after that as an operational system. That's where we're headed, and that's what the Air Force is off doing.
Come on, isn't it really science fiction?
No, no. We actually think it worked. We are in the process of building some of the initial components now and testing them. We've done the risk reduction experiments. We're confident it's going to work, and we're reasonably confident it's going to work on schedule.
Science fiction has to do with things for which the laws of physics do not support. The laws of physics support this very clearly. That has been shown over and over, and so this is not science fiction.
The Lambersons have been involved in the project since its earliest days. Father Don headed the Air Force program. Son Steve is chief scientist today. Do they think the age of the death ray has arrived?
I think where the death ray is here, and we're killing targets, but we can kill specific targets that we're specifically interested in.
Does it cause you any concerns?
No, absolutely not. We can pick out what we shoot at and make sure we only destroy what we are, and it's primarily a defensive weapon, taking out targets that are headed towards us.
Does any other country have this capacity?
Not that I know of.
We would hope that we are at the cutting edge of this research.
Beyond airborne lasers, space, the next, the ultimate battlefield. American scientists estimate that within 10 years, over 1,000 new commercial satellites will be orbiting the Earth. US Space Command believes America has to take charge.
I think the control of space is the nature of the word sounds a little confrontational. I think another way to say control of space, and a way I would like to view it is we want to ensure space is there for everybody to use. In other words, we want to assure, much like the seas, free access. So the same thing's true with space. In order to be able to assure free access, you've got to be able to control pieces of it at certain times. It doesn't mean dominance. It doesn't mean continuous dominance for sure. It just means that when the time is necessary, the United States wants to make sure that space is accessible to us and our allies for purposes which we think are important to our security. That's what control of space is about.
So the logic from your position is that the militarization of space is inevitable.
I hope I'm wrong. But the fact is, if you look at history, history would say that just like we militarized the land, the sea, and the air, because we were protecting our national interests in land, sea, and air as nations, that as our interests move to space, we're going to have to protect those interests in space.
But does the science to do this exist? 10 years ago, the United States launched a Star Wars program. It floundered. What about now?
To take a satellite out from the ground, the science and technology is here today. It's just a matter of national will if you choose to do it.
What about putting lasers in space?
Yeah, very doable. We currently have a program underway here in this country to do a demonstration of a space-based laser, demonstrate conceptually that a laser can operate in space. This will happen in the next decade.
Today, international treaties ban deploying these weapons. Yet as America reaches out to control space, these treaties may succumb to the power of science.
This is a sensitive issue because there are lots of treaties that are out there that when they were crafted make tremendous sense at the time they were crafted. The world is changing. As we look to the future and the world has changed, some of the bedrock agreements that we've had in terms of arms control may require a modification to support the national security.
The Pentagon predicts that for the next 15 years, the US will have no superpower rival. Within that time, American military scientists aim to achieve their dream: full spectrum dominance over land, sea, air, and space, over any enemy, anywhere in the world.